amandla.
For the first time in 2007, South Africa experienced load shedding. We were told that the lights had to be turned off to reduce electricity consumption. 14 years later, we're experiencing rolling blackouts to prevent total darkness. How did we get here?
When Alec Irwin came in as Minister of Public Enterprise in 2004, he came to Eskom apparently and he said, I've read the 98 energy policy. It explicitly says we can run out of power in 2007. Is that still true? And Eskom said, yes, we're on the same track we've been for the last 20 years.
So the problem was a problem of an underestimation of the demand for electricity, and therefore planning for increases in demand of electricity, which were wrong.
I'm going to tell the country there will never be load shedding again. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
That was 2016. Former President Jacob Zuma addressed Eskom employees and South Africans, and everyone was in high spirits. It's now 6 years later, and South Africans have realized that they actually have very little reason to celebrate. Load shedding, or rolling blackouts, as some people refer to it, is still very much with us, and the end doesn't seem near anytime soon. Our program about load shedding and other problems at Eskom starts in the mid-1990s.
Ons moet probeer om meer en meer mense met elektrisiteit te voorsien. Eskom self beplan om in die volgende 5-6 jaar 1 miljoen huise te elektrifiseer.
That vision was driven by the Electricity for All. It was driven by the leadership of Eskom in terms of providing electrical energy to all applications, not just residential customers, but also for agricultural customers, domestic customers and commercial customers.
Die vlak van Eskom se gesondheid in die jare 90 was eintlik baie goed as 'n mens in die oog hou dat hy toe geweldig baie opwekkingsvermoë gehad het. So hy het 'n baie goeie sterk reservemarge gehad. Hy kon gevolglik eenhede uit diens uithaal en hulle oordentlik in stand hou. Dit het daartoe bygedra dat hy eintlik baie goed gehelp het met die groei van die ekonomie in die land.
Electricity was affordable and even cheap throughout the 90s.
You all know for a fact that Eskom has also reduced the real price of electricity by 15%, so as to become the world's lowest producer of electricity.
The Eskom vision was very clear, world's lowest cost. And we could deliver the world's lowest cost to our customers by being a top utility, top performing utility.
We must follow national policy, will we not? So the Eskom leadership at the moment is, in my view, a bit of a...
produced by the various...
These former Eskom employees say there was a reason for the cheaper electricity.
And because Eskom had been decided or been told to stop building any new stations in the mid-90s, essentially what the tariff came down to was just the cost of operating the Eskom plants, operating and maintenance and fuel. There was no capital inclusion in there.
Johan Prinsloo, a former employee of Eskom, says the white paper on energy published in 1998 said private role players needed to take over some of the electricity generation in South Africa.
Daar in Eskom was in 1999 was hulle verbied om te bou. En daar was toe besluit dat nuwe kragstasies sal deur onafhanklike of private kragverskaffers gebou word. So Eskom kon dus nie meer kragstasies gebou het nie.
A lot of IPPs came to the marketplace in that period from, let's say, mid-90s through until the early 2000s and said, we can't compete in the marketplace. Can we sell our power to Eskom at our cost? And Eskom said, as your cost is higher than our cost, we're not going to buy your power, pretty logically.
Some former Eskom employees agree with the former Eskom CEO, Dr. Ian McRae, who said government should be kept out of the engine room of Eskom.
Ek dink Eskom was altyd a creature of statute. Met ander woorde, hy was 'n organisasie wat op sy eie bestaan het, hy het sy eie besluite gemaak, hy het sy eie geld gaan leen. En dit was 'n resep wat goed gewerk is.
But in 2002, Eskom became a company in terms of the Companies Act. Its first board was appointed by the minister.
Eskom moet 'n onafhanklike organisasie wees, want hy is op die einde van die dag die supplier of last resort.
In 1998, the White Paper on Energy also warned that by 2007, South Africa would need more electricity than was being generated.
If I'm growing the economy at this rate, or growing the demand at this rate, I will pass through my available capacity on this date.
In the early 2000s, Eskom received numerous awards. In 2001, the Financial Times in New York named Eskom the world's top electricity company. And in 2004, Markino named Eskom the most admired brand in South Africa.
Ek dink dat die rede dat Eskom op daai stadium steeds baie effektief was en daar was 'n groot hoeveelheid elektrifisering wat gebeur het in die townships, is waarskynlik so. Ons het op internasionale verhoë, soos byvoorbeeld in Seagrey, was Eskom hoog aangeskreeu.
With no new power stations being built and a growing economy, in 2003, 3 power stations started operating again.
You've got X thousand megawatts, unique growth is coming in, you bring them back. So that was 3,500 megawatts, I think, of plant due to be brought back.
So the idea was that they would come in and give us more the energy component, so that during the week, the mid-merit time of the week, they would be available to give us the required energy to contribute to the economy.
But the power generated by the 3 stations wasn't enough. In 2004, Eskom was granted permission to build new power stations.
When Alec Irwin came in as Minister of Public Enterprise in 2004, he came to Eskom apparently and he said, I've read the 98 energy policy. It explicitly says we can run out of power in 2007. Is that still true? And Eskom said, yes, we're on the same track we've been for the last 20 years, in terms of about 3.5% growth rate. We'll pass through ground zero in about 2007. And he said, okay, well, what are you building to fill the need? And Eskom said, nothing, because we've been told to do nothing. It's cabinet policy, not allowed to build. We have no organisation. And the free market will build. And he said, but there's no free market. So in about 4 months, Eskom went from, you've got no plans, no engineering teams, no project management teams, nobody in the company whose job description says new build construction, to being on site with 2 of the largest projects in the world in about 24 months.
In the article,
In 2007, the deadline for Eskom to generate enough power was looming.
Daarin 'n mens kan dit seker maar net met een woord opsom en dit is bestuur. Mense moes 'n besluit geneem het op sekere stadiums om nuwe kragstasies te laat bou. Dit het nie gebeur nie, dit het betyds gebeur nie. Die besluit was laat geweest.
The problem of electricity comes from growth. It comes from the growth and the development of the country. Not from a country going down, but a country going up. So the problem was a problem of an underestimation of the demand for electricity, and therefore planning for increases in demand of electricity, which are wrong.
The problems in 2006-07 were driven by two things. One was at that point, still a gradually falling performance of our coal stations, not dramatic, but, and growth. Basically, at the end of 2006, Eskom was saying to customers, we cannot feed you with more power. Do not invest in this new plant you're planning to build. And so economic growth was throttled in this country from about 2007 onwards.
Despite 2 gas turbine power stations coming online in 2007, the lights started to dim.
The reserve margin is not going to improve in the next 5 to 7 years. And which therefore means that if the demand for electricity continues to increase, there will not be the supply.
In December 2007, South Africa experienced its first power cuts. Former President Thabo Mbeki apologized on behalf of government.
I phone all of them, the provincial chairs of the
Die president van die ANC, Thabo Mbeki, het in die openbaar verskoning gevra aan Eskom omdat die regering nie meer geld in kragstasies belê het nie.
By January 2008, the power cuts had become more regular. They became known as load shedding.
The base load stations, the workhorses of the power system, these have now aged. They've aged. And it's these units that are not giving the desired performance. The expectation of performance on the base load stations is 100% availability.
Kendal had to shut down because Kendal had not enough coal in its stockpile to actually drive its thing. And that was a question of, that had been coming for some time. That stockpile had been falling over the previous couple of years, in fact.
As ons nie daai weerkrag instel nie, dan kry jy 'n situasie waar van die kragstasies kan begin tip en jy kry 'n hele die woord wat hulle gebruik, 'n cascade van energie. En die Amerikaners het hierso in 2000 het hulle so 'n geval gehad daar in Westelike. Hulle was vir meer as 'n week voor hulle die krag kon herstel na stede soos New York toe.
Eskom implemented load shedding more often, and South Africa started paying the price.
Water is to life as what electricity is to the economy. It's as simple as that.
South African industry is classically mining and heavy industry, and that requires electricity. And you've got a situation where if you're planning an industrial plant, you're planning 2 or 3 years in the future, maybe 5 years in the future, and if you cannot see electricity being in that window to feed it, and Eskom is saying to you can't have it, then you don't do it. The economy of this country is about 1/3 less than it would be if we had if in the mid-1990s, Eskom had committed to more power stations and gone on in the old model of Eskom generation building.
In mid-2000, Eskom planned to build 2 massive power stations, Medupi and Kusile, to mitigate the damage. But during the planning phase, there were already some cracks.
Medupi and Kusile was such a crash program that with the 12 units, that's 6 on each, they were physically building the components for the 12th before the first one was actually commissioned. So any lessons that you learnt on the first one being commissioned were unable to be factored into machine number 12. I'm saying 12 because there's 2 6s, because you've already built it. So
that's what they refer to as the design errors.
In steede daarvan dat die eerste eenheid van die nuwe stasies in 2007 aanlyn moes gekom het die eerste eenheid van Medupi eers in 2015 aanlyn gekom, 'n agterstand van 8 jaar.
When Eskom was building in the mid-1980s, we had an entire floor of Megawatt Park, which is civil engineering.
Correct.
When we started the construction of the gas turbine stations, which slightly predate Medupi and Kusile, we had one civil engineer in the company.
So internally, Eskom did not have the engineering capacities, capability to take on these projects. Before you even start, you lost the game.
Vir hierdie winter is dit belangrik dat al ons verbruikers seker maak hulle elektrisiteit bespaar, soos ons hulle gevra het, veral in die aande tussen 5:00 en 9:00.
In 2015, Dr. Dirk Herman of Solidarity wrote that thousands of white employees had left Eskom over years. But that wasn't his main concern. He also wrote, "The problem is not necessarily that those who left the utility were white, but that they were people who possessed managerial and technical skills. Not only skills were lost in the process, but also institutional memory."
We'd gone from 68,000 employees in about 1985 or so,
85, correct,
down to below 30,000.
'n Klomp van die mense soos byvoorbeeld die bestekopnemers, quantity surveyors, siviele ingenieurs, al daai mense projekbestuurders was afgelê in daai tyd. Hulle was net nie meer by Eskom beskikbaar nie.
The boilers at Medupi and Kusile are almost 45 stories high. So you had the most complex engineering to be handled by the most non-existent engineering. So that was the problem. Most complex to not having the skills and capability.
I think morale in Eskom is probably one of the biggest issues you currently got. And that, I think, is a challenge that... So I'm not worried about the caliber of physical people. I'm worried about are they linked to major projects and they believe in what they're doing, and have they got the enthusiasm, or are they all looking for jobs outside? And I suspect an awful lot of Eskom's good people are looking for jobs outside. Not because of the money, but because you really want to be involved in this dead horse.
In 2015, the international credit rating agency Standard & Poor's downgraded Eskom to junk status.
Eskom had a rating, a debt rating that was better than sovereign, and I think that to me was the cherry on the top. And what happened from that sovereign rating was a progressive decline. It just did not happen in one time in 2015. It was progressively declining over the years.
The model indicates that demand will exceed supply for the next 24 to 36 months.
Cracks began to show at Eskom.
By 2007, suddenly there was no spare capacity. And the battle cry in the company was what's called KLO, or keep the lights on. That was the claim. And essentially it was understood from 2007 onwards that you could sort of bend the rules as long as you kept the lights on. And that was very strong. It got stronger and stronger. Now, what then happens is you've got this acceptance of slightly bending the rules to make things happen.
The Eskom of yesterday. The teamwork that took place, that integrated teamwork, it was not it was a teamwork of enormous substance. And there was just no room for corruption. You would have been flushed out very quickly.
Old and new power stations often experience problems and bring little hope.
Nou met betrekking tot die ou kragstasies, dit is moeite werd om te noem dat ons kragstasies met die uitsondering van Medupi en Kusile gemiddeld 41 jaar oud is. En hierdie kragstasies het 'n harde lewe agter die plat. Hulle is nie behoorlik in stand gehou nie. Hulle is baie harder bedryf as die internasionale norm en dit maak natuurlik dat hulle fundamenteel nie so betroubaar is as wat hulle moet wees nie.
Jy het 'n baie goeie reservemarge nodig as jy wil ordentlike instandhouding doen. En daar bestaan tans nie as gevolg van die tekort van kapasiteit 'n voldoende reservemarge nie. Eskom kort op die huidige oomblik in die omgewing van 6000 megawatt nou op die huidige oomblik, sodat hy vir daardie ou stasies kan uit diens uithaal en hulle behoorlik kan voorsien.
Eskom is in crisis, and the risks it poses to South Africa are great. It could severely damage our economic and social development ambitions.
It's an enabler for economic growth. Jy het elektrisiteit nodig om jou ekonomie aan die gang te hou en om te laat groei. As ons byvoorbeeld teen ongeveer 5% ekonomies moet groei, gemiddeld gesproke, moet die groei in ons opwekkingsvermoë in die land teen ongeveer 2 na 3% per jaar groei.
But in the end, Eskom is just too big to fail.
Eskom is te ingegrawe in die hele Suid-Afrikaanse samelewing op te kan val. Daar's nie 'n manier wat ons Eskom kan afskakel nie, want daar's ook iemand anders wat kan intree in daai werk doen.
Die organisasie Sake-eenheid Suid-Afrika, oftewel BUSA, sê indien onafhanklike kragverskaffers nie toegelaat word om elektrisiteit op te wek vir die nasionale kragnetwerk nie, sal beurtkrag nooit beëindig word nie.
The government went out with 2 tenders to the marketplace. The Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Programme, bid window 5, and the Risk Mitigation Independent Power Producer Programme, about a year ago. And they got bids in the same time period from both of them.
Ons rol is om nuwe kragopwekking moontlik te maak en veral kragopwekking dan deur die privaat sektor. Daarom het ons ook van meet af aan die verslapping van die lisensiebeperkings wat in die ou dae gegeld het van 1 megawatt. Die president het aangekondig dat dit gelig gaan word na 100 megawatt.
I have yet to hear anybody actually signing a contract on the 100 megawatt power plants. Because I bet you they're going to find that they're going to have to turn to Eskom and say, what is your capacity charge? In other words, what is your charge to make up whenever my sun is not shining?
Sir Mick Davis has the last word. At one stage, he was in charge of the finances at Eskom. Late last year, the Centre for Development and Enterprise interviewed him.
Eskom, unfortunately, is so large and so integral to the South African economy that its decline is potentially fatal for the economy itself.